And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Good afternoon. I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist John Cowan. Thanks for joining us today for the marine forecast. We'll start out looking at sea ice across the Alaska coastline. Along the Beaufort coast, we have some sea ice starting to develop. Colder temperatures are helping out with that, but however, most of our offshore areas do remain ice-free as of today. The ice pack remains well to the west, north of Siberia at this point in time. Looking at tonight's weathers, we still have some snow showers lingering across parts of the west coast. However, high pressure is going to help clear out those poor weather conditions, keeping winds fairly calm around this area. The North Slope still dealing with some fronts that are going to move in from the northwest, keeping that snow and some gustier winds across that region. However, far out west, we do have our next storm system that's going to be bringing unsettled weather to the western and central Aleutians. This warm front will be moving across the region. Cold air out ahead of it, keeping precipitation, mixed bag of rain and snow. However, as we transition behind the front, lots of warm air moving in behind it, bringing mostly rain. Now, as we look into the Gulf of Alaska, we see a fairly deep low pressure system here that's going to be remaining in place over the next couple of days, bringing some stronger winds across much of the Gulf Coast, particularly the Panhandle, as well as a mixed bag of wintry weather. As we get into Friday, this low deepens down to 966 millibars, so a very deep low. Some very strong winds across this region, specifically across portions of the southern Panhandle, and unsettled weather again along most of the coast from Prince William Sound east. As we look back over towards the Bering Sea, our storm system here, our warm front has moved into the central Aleutians. Again, rain behind the front with warm air moving up behind it. Ahead of the front, plenty of snow. High pressure's cleared out most of the interior, so absolutely beautiful weather here for the west coast. However, the North Slope still dealing with some snow showers and some stronger winds across portions of the eastern Beaufort coast. Now for Saturday's weather, the North Slope, again, still dealing with more of the same, a general improvement trend, winds starting to back off finally by Saturday, but the northern half of the state looking absolutely beautiful. The southern half we're dealing with what we would call a seasonably stormy pattern, a series of low pressure systems bringing generally unsettled weather across the Bering Sea as well as the Gulf Coast. However, the winds do start to relax by Saturday. You can see our low pressure system starting to finally weaken and move off to the south, so the wind should be starting to taper off across the Panhandle. Now let's look at your marine forecast. So winds generally going to be out of the southeast for Saturday. 25 to 30 knots is what we're looking at. Seas generally around 10 to 12 feet for the offshore areas. Looking farther inland here, winds generally out of the southeast, again 25 to 30 knots. Seas about 5 to 6 feet across most areas here. Saturday, we're looking at winds generally turning more easterly to even northeasterly from Petersburg north, around 30 knots, seas increasing up to 6 to 7 feet. And then for our offshore areas, now look, we got some stronger winds moving into the area, 35 knots, gusting to 50 at times, seas going up over 20 feet offshore south of Sitka, and then up to 15 feet or so offshore Yakutat. Looking over towards the central Gulf Coast, Cook Inlet, winds out of the north at about 25 knots for Friday. 35 knots or so is what we're looking at south of Kenai. Seas moving up to about 11 to 13 feet across this area. Offshore of Prince William Sound, winds generally out of the east to northeast, around 30 knots, seas about 10 feet or so. And then as we move into Saturday, winds turning generally offshore across the Prince William Sound area out of the north, around 20 to 25 knots. Seas generally 3 to 5 feet, 7 feet here south of Cordova. And then looking closer to the Cook Inlet, we got 10 knots offshore of Anchorage, so winds coming down quite a bit on Saturday, 2-foot seas, and then south of Kenai about 3 to 5 feet with winds in that 15 to 25 knot range. And then for the Alaska Peninsula, we're looking at still some pretty strong winds on Friday, winds out 30 knots out of the north on the Bering side, seas 11 to 12 feet, 4 to 5 feet on the Pacific side. And then for Saturday, winds generally decreasing. We have some variable winds around the 10 to 15 knot range. However, as we get farther west towards Cold Bay, we do have that warm front that'll be approaching, bringing some stronger winds. 25 knots is what we're looking at, with seas going up to about 9 feet on the Bering side and 6 feet on the Pacific side. Over the far western Aleutians, our warm front here on Friday is bringing those stronger winds. 35 knots or so out of the southwest. Seas about 13 to 15 feet for most areas here. However, as we go farther off to the east towards Unalaska, generally calmer winds, 20 to 25 knots or so, and seas 8 to 10 feet. By Saturday, that warm front moves farther east, so we expect the stronger winds and higher seas around 8 to 10 feet for that area. For the southwest coast, we're looking at generally light winds on Friday, 10 knots or so out of the north, seas 2 to 4 feet. And much the same on Saturday, although winds do turn more offshore out of the east. Still in that 15 to 20 knot range, seas remaining in that 2 to 4 foot state. And then over the northern portion of the state, along the Beaufort coast, east of Utqiagvik, we have winds out of 25 knots or so out of the west. Seas still about 6 to 8 feet across most of these areas. However, as we go farther south along the Chukchi coast, towards the Seward Peninsula, things start to calm down quite a bit. Winds generally 10 to 15 knots out of the north-northwest, and seas 3 to 5 feet. Same story for Saturday, winds turning slightly more offshore across this area. Still some fairly relaxed seas, 2 to 4 feet. And then across the north slope, we do even have winds coming down across this area, seas coming down to about 4 to 6 feet. And that'll wrap up our marine forecast. Thanks for joining us.